Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Good morning. Did everyone have a great time last night? Good. I know I did. I was hoping everyone else had as much fun as I did. We're going to be very casual this morning for this first hour. We know it's early. We appreciate so many of you getting up early to come out and hear what Attorney General Wilson has to say. I think we're going to have appropriately some eye-opening comments this morning about what's going on in our country with voter ID and election fraud. And I will tell you, last night I checked email one last time before going to bed, and we had an email sent to our Steamboat Institute email address telling us that we were racist pigs for bringing voter ID onto our agenda. So, there you go. Without further ado, we want to get right into it this morning. We're going to be a little more casual as we're starting early. But as many of you know, you heard Alan Wilson speak last year at our conference. He is, I believe, the youngest Attorney General in the country. He's the 51st Attorney General from the great state of South Carolina. He led was one of the key figures behind the 26-state lawsuit against the legislation known as Obamacare. So I want to, without further ado, bring up Alan Wilson to talk about voter ID issues.
Thanks. I guess I'm going to kick off the sunrise service. I think we got all the Baptists in the back rowers. Man, wow, it is so great to be with you today. I'm very excited. I can see that this is the hardcore folks, the ones that are getting up at the early hours of the morning to talk about an interesting issue. I'll tell you, when I ran for Attorney General and got elected, I didn't realize the issues that I'd be confronted with. And there are days I wake up and I feel like the dog that caught the car. Because when you look at what this Justice Department is doing, it is absolutely atrocious. I have had several people ask me about voter ID and why it's important, and they were asking me some questions about, well, didn't the Supreme Court already talk about this issue several years ago? Well, yes, they did. And I'm going to talk to you about that, but what the Justice Department is doing is aging me. Jennifer just said I was the youngest Attorney General in the country. I want you to know I do have the oldest Chief of Staff in the country. He's 73. I'm 39. But by the end of this first term that I'm in, I will probably look like Kevin Jackson. And I don't mean I'll be black. I mean I'll be bald. So, or I might be black too by the time I get to this thing. But I want to talk about ensuring election integrity. And while this issue probably isn't hitting Colorado the way it's hitting other states, it goes to the underlying point of what kind of Justice Department we have right now and what kind of Justice Department we could have if President Obama wins re-election. So I'd like to go ahead and kick off our little slide here. The first myth, when I go and I speak to groups around the state of South Carolina, around the country, I have members in the audience who are African American or black, depending on if you want to be hyphenated or not. They say, what's the hurry? Why are so many white politicians in the South or in other Voting Rights Act states trying to pass these laws? I said, what's the hurry? We started in 1996. Michigan passed the first voter ID law. South Carolina tried to pass it in 2003. We only got it signed in 2011. So there's no hurry, and I could not have foreseen that State Senator Barack Obama in 1996 would have been president in 2008 or 2009. So the first myth is that this is a rash of a bunch of southern states that are angry that an African-American president was elected. That's not the case. And if you also know, the first Supreme Court case, the Crawford case went to the Supreme Court in 2008, was an Indiana law that was passed in 2004. A lot of states were waiting to see how the court would rule on that before they actually started running their cases up the flagpole in their respective general assemblies. So as you can tell, this is not based on President Obama or anything other than the fact that states were seeing different kinds of voter fraud being perpetrated in their respective jurisdictions. Now, I love this picture. They say that it's onerous to make someone have to get a photo ID. If you look here, this is a union employee who wants to go in and vote at the IAM Boeing vote, and he needs a photo ID to vote. Now, when people say, how can people be against putting a photo ID on a voter registration card? The argument on the other side is this. The argument is that There are most people who are old or poor or minority who they argue are generally the more poor and rural folks. They don't have the ability to go get a state-issued photo ID. They can get a voter registration card, but a lot of them don't have birth certificates, or if they're poor and they've gotten divorced and their names changed, there would be hurdles for them to get past in order to get a photo ID. Let me tell you, this is the most ridiculous argument I've ever heard. You need a photo ID to get on a plane. You need a photo ID to get prescription medication. You need photo ID to check into this hotel. You need photo ID to buy Sudafed, for heaven's sakes. When Texas had their voter ID lawsuit, they flew a young woman who was a college student who said she could not get a photo ID because she didn't have the appropriate documents to go to the DMV in Texas to get a voter ID card. Well, first question was asked, well, how did you fly to Washington, D.C. for this case? But, even to get a tattoo, enter a military base, buy alcohol, donate blood. I mean, these are things that generally you're required to have a photo ID. We're not requiring you do anything more onerous than the act of actually going to vote requires you to do. Now, this is something fun. This is interesting. You look at the majority opinion in the U.S. Supreme Court case, Crawford v. Marion County, which basically said that Indiana's requirement that voters have a photo ID is not violative of the Voting Rights Act or the U.S. Constitution. Look who authored that opinion in the majority. Not exactly the conservative juggernaut in the court at the time. Justice Stevens authored the majority opinion when he came to the same conclusion that there's nothing onerous, there's nothing unconstitutional, there's nothing that is wrong with requiring people have a simple photo ID to protect the integrity of probably the most sacred right that we possess. One last thing. A question was asked to me, how can the Justice Department stop a state from doing something that the Supreme Court has already ruled is constitutional? Well, if you go back to the Voting Rights Act, they said in 1965 there were a handful of states that had a history of discrimination and that those states were going to be put on I call it the toddler mat. It's where I put my kids when they misbehave. You go to timeout, and if you want to get off the mat, you have to ask permission. South Carolina was one of those children that was misbehaving in the 60s. No one disputes the discrimination at that time. What they did was they put 9 full states plus an additional 7 states with only partial jurisdictions on the voting rights list, meaning that you have to come ask the Justice Department for permission to alter a voting law. In other words, in our state, if we want our voting office to open at 8 a.m. instead of 8:30, we have to go to the federal government to ask permissions to open up a precinct voting office 30 minutes early. That's because we're a pre-clearance state. The interesting thing is states that are under Section 5, that's the toddler mat that you heard me talk about. States that are under Section 5 that have to go to the federal government to get permission to change their voting laws, they are put on Section 5 because under Section 4 there's a formula that says, state, if you meet these particular criteria, you're a bad state and you have to go to timeout and ask Mother May I if you want to change your voting laws. The formula that's used to make states go through that process was created in 1963 when they were debating this act. It hasn't changed in 50 years. And in 2006, when they reauthorized the Voting Rights Act, which put all of these states back on the pre-clearance list, including South Carolina, for another 25 years, South Carolina has to go ask permission because the Congress reauthorized it. They used the same formula from 1963, 1964. So they're using the sins of people from 50 years ago to punish the citizens of states who haven't even been born yet. Now that, in my opinion, is constitutionally suspect. In South Carolina, and I'll be the first to say, we have a checkered past. We've come a long way. In our state, we have a female Indian governor. A third of our state is African American. A third of our population is African American. We have 6 members of Congress. 2 of them are African American. That's a third of our delegation. One of our members of Congress, Tim Scott, who's one of 2 black Republicans in Congress, won in a predominantly white district. So you can't say that the protections of the Voting Rights Act need to be applied today the way they were in 1965. The Supreme Court recognized that in the Crawford case. Of course, Justice Scalia concurred. We don't have to dwell on that. Now, this is the other one. This is another chart I want to show you. I love this chart because they said in Georgia, Now, Georgia had to go through the same process we did, but they went through the previous Justice Department, which pre-cleared their voting law. What's interesting about Georgia's law is that everyone said, oh my goodness, the sky is falling, death and carnage, asteroids are going to hit the earth, minorities are going to be suppressed at an alarming rate. Georgia's law was passed in implemented in 2007. If you look, the 2004 Latino votes from 2004 to 2008 increased 140%. Okay, the black turnout increased from 834,000 to 1.2 million. That was a 42% increase in the vote before Georgia's photo ID law was passed and after it was passed. And everyone said, but Alan, that was 2008. Barack Obama was on the ballot, a new era, a new dawn. The Christ figure had returned, and we're all going to be, everyone was excited. The kids were turning out. Okay, let's go to 2010, which is a midterm election. Latino vote from 2006 to 2010, which are congressional elections. Latino vote increased by 66.5%. Black vote increased by 44.2%. And, of course, the white vote also went up. It went up across the board. When Indiana passed their law, in 2003, the black voting age population that turned out was 54%. In 2009, the black voting age population that turned out after their law was passed was 59%. In every single state that has passed voter ID, the minority voting population has actually increased. Now, one issue that everyone brings up in Indiana and in Georgia and South Carolina and other states that are trying to pass voter ID laws is there are so many people who have a voter registration card but don't have a photo ID. In Georgia, in 2005, 0.05% of voters that were registered to vote did not have a photo ID. 0.05%. In 2009, several years after the implementation of their law, it was 0.009% who did not have a photo ID. That is the asteroid hurtling the earth that everyone's been telling us about. It's actually gone, voting by minorities has gone up in every state. Now, voter fraud is real. I'm going to talk about voter fraud. They say there is no voter fraud. You have a solution in search of a problem. Well, let me go over a couple of things. In 1984, a Chicago grand jury report found large numbers of aliens registered to vote in Chicago. The U.S. Attorney estimated that 80,000 illegal aliens were registered and dozens were indicted and convicted. They found 100,000 phony votes cast in the 1982 gubernatorial election. A 1984 Brooklyn grand jury, which was run by a district attorney who was a former Democratic congresswoman, found a widespread conspiracy that operated from 1968 to 1982. The scheme included not only voter impersonation at the polls, but voting under fictitious names that had been successfully registered. Thousands of fraudulent votes were cast during that 14-year period. One witness said he ran a crew of 8 who each voted 20 times in one day, and there were approximately 20 other crews at the same time. That is in one election. The New York Daily News in 2004 had a story where they found 46,000 voters were registered in both New York City and the state of Florida. Between 400 and 1,000 of these voters had voted twice in at least one election over the last several election cycles. Y'all remember the 2000 election, Florida? That was kind of a close election, wasn't it? But there's no voter fraud. The Evening Star in Auburn, Alabama headline found, I love this one, when our lawsuit, this is the story that really changed my strategy. When I read this, we had the League of Women Voters and NAACP wanted to intervene on the side of the government to stop us from implementing our law. When I read this story, I said, come on in, the water's just fine. I let them in because the League of Women Voters put up a woman in Indiana, in the Indiana lawsuit several years ago, they said could not get a photo ID. The reason she could not get a photo ID that this story uncovered was because she had a Florida driver's license, did not want to surrender it in Indiana. She even had a primary residence in Florida and filed for the homestead exemption on her property taxes in Florida. But she didn't want to get rid of her driver's license in Indiana. In 2008, the Milwaukee Police Department had a report that John Kerry campaign workers were fraudulently voting and even went unprosecuted. 2011 in Wisconsin, anyone here from Wisconsin? The SEIU, the Service Employees International Union organizers, registered to vote using out-of-state IDs and a Marriott hotel address. 2012, 18 voters in one county were born between 1900 and 1901. All of them voted in that one county in Texas. There are only 325 supercentenarians living in the U.S. 18 of them apparently live in one county. 2012, a dead dog named Mozart receives voter registration forms from the county. Now, that's a double whammy. First, he's deceased, and he's a dog. Philadelphia, 2012, there was a report that came out, 23 unregistered voters voted in 2012 primary election. This is double voting and impersonation. 2012, now, a couple weeks ago, I went to the American Bar Association that was held, their annual conference was in Chicago, Illinois, to debate Jesse Jackson on voter ID. Now, y'all probably think, boy, Wilson, you've lost your mind. He ended up not showing up because his son was sick, but they had another woman there. But I got to let them know this because this report had come out that day, and no one had read this. But in LaSalle County, 90 miles from Chicago, the registered voters in that county alone were 520% of the actual living citizens in that county. Over 5 times the number of registered voters as there were people in that county. And there were about 11 counties, or excuse me, 7 counties in Illinois that had more registered voters than they had people living there. We'll just click past these because I've already gone over some of them. In a minute, y'all heard about the 25-year-old guy that was offered the vote of Eric Holder. We'll come back to that in a minute. And we already talked about Illinois. Now, the Brennan Center, these are the headlines that you see about, when people talk about, the Republican Party or anyone that's not liberal, they get the racist, the R word thrown in their face. And you see that these liberal bias groups insert these bogus surveys out there, and the media picks them up, and they run with these headlines that tend to drive public perception. Well, I want to talk about the Brennan. The Brennan Center published a report, and I found this report interesting. When they did this report, they only polled voting-age citizens. They didn't poll actual or likely citizens or voters. They didn't even poll registered voters or eligible to vote at all. They only polled people who were 18 or older. When you look at the Brennan Center, this is the same center named for Justice Brennan, not exactly a conservative guy. They actually provide lawyers for the ACLU and Texas's voter ID case. The woman who is the co-chairman of the Brennan Center is also co-chair of Catalyst Data Polling Firm, which is the polling firm for Obama for America, as well as the DCCC, the Democratic Senatorial Committee, over 30 Democratic members of Congress. These are the polling firms that the Justice Department and these liberal groups are using to drive the media story on why voter ID is bad and it's going to suppress minority votes. So that's why we have to be educated and vigilant in speaking out against these bogus surveys. They don't mention the American University Survey, which was actually conducted by one of Jimmy Carter's top advisors. This was a survey in Maryland, Indiana, and Mississippi, where they found less than 0.5% of registered voters lacked a photo ID. A 2006 survey of 36,000 voters only found that 23 people didn't have a photo ID. I'm going to come back to this one. Before I move on, I get a bee in my bonnet about the Brennan Center and about how they're basically an arm of the Obama administration. The Justice Department is using them as unbiased data. Can you imagine if if we'd used Karl Rove's firm to try to counterpoint that? Can you imagine how we would have been burned in effigy? This is the kind of stuff that I'm running into with the Justice Department. When the Justice Department denied pre-clearance to South Carolina, what they did was they sent us a letter saying, we're going to deny you pre-clearance. Now, before I tell you why they denied us pre-clearance, I want to talk about this. I'm actually going to go here. They found that there were 237,000 people in South Carolina who were registered to vote, okay, but did not have a state-issued photo ID. Under South Carolina's photo ID law that we're trying to get passed, a state-issued driver's license, a state-issued identification card, a military ID, a passport, or a new voter registration card with a photo on it are the 5 approvable forms of ID. Well, they found 237,000 voters without an ID. But what we found out after this was that 37,000 of them were deceased and had not been taken off the rolls yet. 96,000 were people who had moved out of the state and moved to another state to surrender their South Carolina driver's license. That driver's license was sent back to South Carolina by the receiving state, and that receiving state says, this person now belongs to us, please take them off your rolls. They had not been taken off yet. One stat that's not on there, 27,502 people were people where on the DMV list, their name was William Smith. On the voter list, her name was Bill Smith. They were double counted. There was one voter who was 130 years old. I bet you she's been on the Smucker's jar once or twice. I mean, there were 300 people listed at one address. It was a college dorm. By the way, one of the college students that has intervened on behalf of the NAACP in our case, just like the League of Women Voters intervenor, this is a young African-American woman who intervened in our case, and I allowed her to come in. I wanted her in because she said she could not get an approved South Carolina photo ID. The reason she could not get an approved South Carolina voter ID in order to vote was because she had a Georgia driver's license. She is going to college in South Carolina and did not want to surrender her Georgia driver's license. So she said, I would not be able to vote in South Carolina. In 2008, she actually voted in South Carolina's Democratic primary, and then she went home for the summer and voted in another Georgia election. And then she came back to school in the fall and voted in the general election again. So she was voting in both states, but she said she couldn't get a driver's license to be able to register to vote in South Carolina. That's why she wanted to be part of our lawsuit. Back to these numbers. Of those 237,000 voters, by the way, that number got winnowed down to about 27,000 people who were registered to vote in South Carolina but did not have a South Carolina ID card. Of the 27,000, we don't know how many of them are like that young woman who intervened in our case, who have a photo ID card from another state. They just can't get a South Carolina's driver's license. So that number could be far lower. We just don't know yet. But I want to go back and let's look at the math. When they denied pre-clearance, this is what they said in their letter, and this is off the ABC News report. Minority registered voters were 20% more likely to lack a DMV-issued ID than white registered voters and thus be effectively disenfranchised. That's what Tom Perez wrote with the Justice Department. Okay, all right, here's the deal. 10% of blacks in South Carolina do not have a photo ID. 8.6% of whites do not have a photo ID. Okay, what's the difference? 1.6. 8.4 and 10, yeah, 1.6. How did they get the 20% more likely number? The reason they get that is because the number 10 is 20% higher than the number 8.4. So that's what the media ran with. They didn't run with there was a 1.6. By the way, that was based on a 237,000 number. Y'all just realize that's not 230. That's including dead people and expatriated people and double-listed people and people who have IDs from other states and 130-year-old people. Oh, by the way, there were 30 people in a jail that were registered to vote with the jail's address. But 90% of African-American voters do have a photo ID. 91.4% of white voters do. There's a 1.6% difference. But they say 20% more likely. That's the kind of stuff that I'm dealing with the Justice Department. This is Texas's voter ID trial fact sheet. The Obama campaign Get Out the Vote firm provided paid data analysis for DOJ expert witness testimony. I just mentioned that a minute ago, the Catalyst firm and the Brennan Center. The data improperly listed, same in South Carolina, 1.4 million Texas voters as lacking a photo ID who either had an ID or had moved or were dead or were able to vote by mail without an ID. So people over 65 can vote without an ID. These are some people that did not have a photo ID. Apparently, they would be suppressed. Well, I'm going to come back to that. We're getting near the end. I'm going to take questions. Let's go ahead and do it right now. This is my favorite one. I love going to speak to Democratic groups in South Carolina, and I've got a great relationship with the black community in my area of the state, and I've actually gone and done this presentation for black leaders and black pastors who I've actually get along with very well, and they've been very respectful, and I've done this presentation for them. There was a case called LaRoque v. Holder. It's now called Nix v. Holder, and it's going before the U.S. Supreme Court, and it's challenging Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. That's the mother may I put the state on the toddler mat provision. They're challenging the constitutionality of that. But in 2000, this is what this case is about. In 2008, there was a referendum that changed the city elections from partisan to nonpartisan, taking the R and the D and whatever other party designators out there off of the ballot. So you have to vote for the person, not the party. 64% of the 7,600 ballots cast supported changing Kinston's election system. Those people wanted to go nonpartisan. Kinston is 62.6% African American. 2/3 of the voters that voted in that election were African American. They voted 2-1 to do this. The DOJ denied preclearance and refused the results of the referendum. The Department of Justice says you can't go to nonpartisan elections in Kinston, North Carolina. This is what they told a black community. What reason? Oh, I'm glad you asked. Here's the letter that Loretta King sent on August 17, 2009, and I showed this to this group of African American leaders. I said, listen, don't take my words for it. Let's go ahead. Removing the partisan queue in municipal elections will in all likelihood eliminate the single factor that allows black candidates to be elected to office. I like this one at the top. The change to nonpartisan elections would also likely eliminate the party's campaign support and other assistance that is provided to black candidates because it eliminates the party's role in the election. This is not about blacks to the Department of Justice. This is about a Democratic stronghold. And I'm shocked that they actually put that in writing in a government document, but they did. So that's what this is about. This is not about suppressing minority votes. This is about keeping minorities locked into a party because a party's afraid to lose them, in my opinion. When I threw that up on the screen, one of the ministers in the back of the room, really great guy, he under his breath, he said it loud enough that everyone in the room could hear it. He goes, so I'm too stupid to pick who I want to vote for without them telling me. That is the reason that they did that, and I wanted you to see it. And I can email a copy of this letter to you. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Okay, in just a second, I want you to, we have a video here, and I'm going to set the video up. Have y'all heard of the guy that went into the polling place to vote for? He didn't go in to vote. He went in and asked for if you had Eric Holder on the precinct list. Has anyone who here has not seen that video? You have not? Okay. Eric Holder, who is suing our state to stop us from implementing voter ID, he says there is no voter fraud. This is solely intended. Voter fraud does not exist. He says that we have a solution in search of a problem, and that we have enough protections in the election system, and states like South Carolina need to just shut up. Well, let's go ahead and watch this video right here. Oh.
A man walks into a poll location in Washington, D.C. and asks about United States Attorney General Eric Holder. The poll worker places a mark next to Eric Holder's name and offers the man Eric Holder's ballot to vote.
Hello. Do you have an Eric Holder?
Check it out here.
Northwest?
For the next election, we are told you'll get one that has the mark. No. Well, they did for early voting.
Holter or D-E-R?
Holder.
There was a reason.
That's
Okay.
the name.
And you were a Democrat, and you wanted to
I
take
did.
Northwest, that's the address.
Okay.
Last name?
Please sign the name there.
I actually forgot my ID.
You don't need it, it's all right.
I left it in the car.
As long as you're in here, you're on our list, and that's who you say you are. Okay.
I would feel more comfortable if I just had my ID. Is all right if I go get it in the
Sure, go
car?
back.
I'll be back faster than you can say furious.
We're not going anywhere.
All right, thank you.
Nah, 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 come on. Nah, 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 come on. Nah, 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 come on.
But there is no proof that our elections are marred by in-person voter fraud.
Nah, nah, come on. Nah, 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 come on.
Solutions that have been proposed go to things that do not exist, or go to a problem that does not exist.
And coming up next,
I could sign on your behalf, but I'd say let's try this. Do the best you can. If we can't make any sense of it, then I'll initial it and I'll say it's you. How about that?
But there is no proof.
We take you inside the nation's capital on primary day to show ballots belonging to political celebrities being offered to total strangers.
Just do the best.
Do the best you can.
So if I just do the best I can, I can vote. You'll give me a ballot.
Great. Yeah, of course you can. Yeah.
Problem that does not exist.
If my signature doesn't match like any sort of official signature, do you compare
Take
it?
care of that. That's special dollar.
Do you compare it to any other signature?
Just sit back there. Yeah. She'll have it for you. Take it back there.
I don't have my ID.
Yeah, take it back your special dollar.
But there is no proof.
This is Department of Justice, correct? Do you need an ID to meet someone in the Department of Justice?
It's definitely an ID.
It strikes me as ironic because the Department of Justice strikes down voter laws imposed by state governments. You can't have voter ID laws, yet I need an ID to get into the Department of Justice.
We have these out-of-staters coming into New Hampshire, coming into our polling places.
YouTube video of Timothy Tebow and Thomas Brady.
Secretary Condos has asked Attorney General William Sorrell to investigate.
You're on our list, and that's who you say you are. Okay.
Do we have to leave him up? You know, it's amazing that the Supreme Court in 2007 upheld the protections of a law for the citizens of Indiana, and the Justice Department passed the protections of the citizens of Georgia that the Justice Department is now denying for the citizens of South Carolina, Texas, Pennsylvania, and other states. While voter ID may not be a prevalent issue in the state that you're from, it shows something much deeper, much more ingrained in the kind of administration that we're dealing with, the kind of Justice Department. This is the most lawless Justice Department in the history of our country. This is the kind of stuff that is going to make me look like Kevin Jackson one day. And every day I wake up and this is what I deal with. But this coming week, I'm going to be in Washington, D.C. before a 3-judge panel to argue our case before for voter ID. So hopefully it'll get passed. But if the Justice Department can do this to a state like South Carolina, they can do it to a state that you come from. That's pretty much my presentation. I truncated it down so that we'd have time for questions. I think it's about 7:35, so we have a little bit of time. I'm happy to entertain questions on the issue.
Alan, thank you again. It's great to hear the y'all. One of the things that concerns people in Colorado is that a lot of our voting is all mail, all by mail, and the opportunity for fraud there is just incredible, I think. And it just really totally depends on who's checking. Have you addressed that in South Carolina?
I'm going to come right back to that. You queued me up on something. There's one thing I didn't tell you in my main presentation. In South Carolina, under our law, the one that we're trying to get cleared, if you show up to vote, do not have a photo ID, you can still vote. You have to sign a sworn affidavit saying that you are who you say you are, that you live at the address you claim to live at, and your ballot is filed with your vote. And you don't have to come back, but if for some reason, if it's ever challenged, they at least have a paper document with a witness and you swearing under oath. So there's a way to go back and challenge it. If I walk in and vote for John Smith, there's no way to go back and prove that. You can prove that John Smith had his vote stolen because John Smith shows up an hour later and someone's already voted for him. Or we go back and do an audit 2 or 3 years from now and we find out, well, John Smith was dead or John Smith didn't live in South Carolina. But you can't prove that Alan Wilson came in that day and actually performed the voting without the tool. Your question goes to, what about the people in states where they can early voting or people, senior citizens can send in they can vote by mail. I come from the East Coast. We have a lot of shrimping off the coast of South Carolina. And I had a fisherman once tell me, he says, I got a lot of ripped nets, and I lose a lot of shrimp, but I catch a lot of shrimp. Photo ID is not a cure-all. It's not going to catch every kind of fraud that there is, but it will catch a lot of it. It is a tool that the poll worker can use when they have the human-to-human contact. After the fraud is committed, you can't go back and stop it. You can't go back and catch the person. But what you can do is you can give the poll worker the tool to detect the fraud at the actual time of the vote. But there are other loopholes, and this does not address well, why can't they just mail it in? It doesn't address that. That's another issue for another day. This is just to stop the in-person voter fraud.
Alan, if you find someone has committed voter fraud, do you prosecute them?
Well, we've never been able to stop we've never been able to catch anyone because there are no tools. Like I said, we can see they say that there is no problem, there is no voter fraud. Well, I mean, y'all heard me just read that list of things nationally. Let me give you an anecdote. And I didn't mention South Carolina's voter fraud because we're about to go to court, but I got dozens upon dozens of affidavits of eyewitness accounts. One woman in Florence, South Carolina, was doing what a lot of you do, if taking breakfast and lunch, to the poll workers working that day. She was at one precinct in the morning, and the only reason I know that she remembered this guy, and these are her words, not mine, this incredibly good-looking guy walks in, well-dressed, and she was checking him out. And he walked in, and she was sitting there giving the donuts and coffee while she was kind of checking him out, and she remembered him. He went and voted, and then about 4 hours later, she was bringing lunch to another precinct across town in that Florence city election. The same guy walked in. She goes, oh, that's that good-looking guy from this morning. Same clothes, same everything. Came in and voted a second time. Now, she could have, gone and engaged him and said, sir, I saw you this morning, but that's a very awkward thing to put a person in that position to do. It would have been very difficult for her, but that is an example of how it is. You can't go back and stop someone unless you stop them at the time that they are committing the fraud. Now, the previous election cycle in that same city, there was about 6,000 or 7,000 votes. The mayor that won that race won by one vote. Not that cycle, but the previous cycle. So a lot of these voter fraud cases don't affect presidential elections, although they could. Florida was a close one, but it's the local elections. And one thing I tell black leaders, and by the way, when you confront them with the facts, and I tell them these aren't my numbers. I always cite sources when I do these presentations. I say, go back and do your own homework, and come back and I'll come down. We'll sit down and have coffee. But go verify for yourself. But what I tell them is, I said, you should be for this because when someone perpetrates fraud in voting, they're diluting your vote. Your vote is like a stock. It's like a dollar bill. It only has so much value. And when you insert fraud into the system, the value of your vote gets diminished. It's not just having your vote stolen, which, by the way, the guy that ran the Carter Commission, the Jimmy Carter, James Baker Commission that said we need photo ID in this country to ensure election integrity, the guy that ran that actually had his vote stolen. He used to work for Jimmy Carter. He went to vote one day and said, sir, you already voted. No, I didn't. I'm here now. Well, I'm sorry, you voted this morning. So it's one thing to have your vote stolen. It's another thing to have your vote diminished. And all of our votes are diminished when we don't put basic safeguards on something as sacred as a vote, but we put those on something like an airplane or to buy a Sudafed or to check into a hotel. I don't know if I answered your question, but yes, sir. Well, when I went and spoke to that black group and talked to them and engaged them on the issue, they kept saying, what's the hurry? What's the hurry? Why are you trying to get this passed for this election? And I said, well, listen, forget the fact that we tried in 2003 to do this. This law was signed in May of 2011, a year and 4 months ago. And I told them this a month ago. I said, it was signed over a year ago. We submitted all our paperwork to the Justice Department. The Justice Department waited all the way up until, when we submitted it like in August, they waited up until the night before Christmas Eve to deny us. And every single time that we have done our paperwork or filed our complaints, they always take the full amount of time to keep pushing this thing closer and closer to the election so to make it harder to implement. So you're accusing us of trying to rush to get it passed. Yes, why wouldn't we want to get it passed before the next big election? But you got the Justice Department rushing to push it past the election. So I kind of turn it around. Not you is what I say to them, but the Justice Department keeps pushing it back. We filed a motion for an expedited case. Unfortunately, it landed the week of the Republican National Convention. So I'm going to be I'm flying from here to D.C. on Sunday to try to expedite this thing so that we can get an answer from the court in September, so that we can go ahead and implement this law for the November election. Not all the other states are in that position, unfortunately. But yes, we are trying. It is feasible, but the longer we wait, the harder it's going to be to implement this law.
Hi.
Lived in Virginia for 30 years before we moved to Florida, and I noticed on your first list, the first slide, that you had that Virginia started in 1998 to try to get the law passed, and I think they did. What is the difference between what Virginia proposed and what you're proposing now?
I'm not sure what all is. I mean, there are a lot of voter ID laws out there. I know that we're probably the only state that has that safety net. It's called a reasonable impediment affidavit. In other words, if you were born in 1927 in a barn by a midwife, didn't have a birth certificate, and you, for some reason in the last 90 years, have been unable to find the time to go to, to get a photo ID card, you can show up at the day of the vote and sign the reasonable impediment affidavit saying that was your reason you couldn't get a photo ID, and you can still vote. We have that affidavit. I don't think Virginia has that one. Some states also allow college students to use state-funded colleges to use the state college ID. I disagree with that because colleges usually have transient students from other states and other jurisdictions. And I went to school in state, but in another, 2 hours from my house. I could have used my student ID to register to vote in 2 different places within the same state. A lot of these students that are claiming that they can't register to vote because they can no longer use their student ID, it's because they have a driver's license in another state and they're temporarily in our state or your state. I think Virginia has the student ID allowance. I know Georgia does, but I mean those are minor exceptions. I mean minor differences in the law.
So the Attorney General's Association doesn't have a proposal to put out for all the states that are similar?
Well, it would be the Republican State Leadership Council. Probably would do that because they do all the general assemblies. We don't pass the laws, we enforce them. So it would have to be the general assemblies around the country that meet in their association. They would probably have to coordinate that. Most states have a central theme. Oh, by the way, you mentioned this. In our state, and I mentioned this to those groups I speak to, if you already have a photo ID if you already have a voter registration card, you can go to your voter registration office and have them affix a photo to it, or turn it in and they will mail you one with a photo on it. So if you're already registered to vote, you can get a photo ID added to it. So you don't have to provide a birth certificate. You don't have to provide any other documentation. You're registered to vote. We just want to put a photo on there. I think most states do that. Some states allow different IDs. Most of them all require state ID. Most of them have the military ID provision and the passport provision. I think the biggest difference is we have the affidavit, most states don't, and a lot of states let students use their student ID. That would probably be the biggest difference. It does need to be better coordination, though.
Okay, one last question.
General, one of the things that is getting a lot of attention today that is similar to this are the extended periods of voting that we now have, both through mail-in and in person. Do you think that that has increased the likelihood of fraud or decreased it?
It has increased the opportunity for fraud. I've got a notebook up here that highlights the mail fraud schemes that have been implemented in other states, where what they'll do is they will, John Smith's wife, Martha Smith, passes away. The fraudsters know that, so they will send a voter registration application to Martha Smith at that address. John Smith, or forget that, they'll send it to Bill Smith. John Smith gets it and says, "I'm not Bill Smith," and he throws it in the trash. The fraudsters go and pull it out the trash, and they go and fill it out in his name, and then they have a fraudulent registration. There's all sorts of schemes that they use to implement to get fake voters. And the mail fraud is a huge, huge deal. People in one county in our state, a House member lost by 75 votes. They had 130 votes that were mailed in, and on the signature where you sign your name, it was an X. You can't go back in time and prove that the person there were 130 people in one House district, small House district in the state of South Carolina that actually couldn't spell their name, so they wrote an X. You can't prove a negative. So do I think that the mail statute allows for the opportunity for fraud? You bet it. You bet it does, absolutely. But how do you prove it? And that's the thing. Those are other reforms we need to look at. But back to my shrimp analogy. Let's catch as much shrimp as we can with the nets we got, and then we can go back and look at the nets and patch the holes up in them and try to catch the others. But anyway, I just want to thank all of you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this issue. I see that the numbers have grown, and so y'all are pretty hardcore. I like to see that. And I guess this concludes the sunrise service.